Silence has a power that words can never touch. It's not about withholding communication or trying to manipulate someone. It's about reaching a level of strength where you no longer need to defend, justify, or explain your worth. When you leave quietly, you send a message louder than any confrontation ever could. You're no longer begging to be understood by someone who chose not to understand you. You're not trying to make him see what he's already shown he doesn't value. You simply remove yourself calmly, confidently, and completely. And in that moment, your silence becomes the statement that says everything he refused to hear. When someone is used to having access to your emotions, your attention, your explanations, your love, your silence becomes unsettling. It's the moment the energy shifts. He notices that the texts stop coming, the calls fade away, and the emotional effort you used to pour into him is gone. At first, he might think it's temporary. He assumes you're just giving him space, that you'll come back once the emotions settle. But then the days stretch on, the silence lingers, and that's when the realization hits. You're not just quiet, you're done. That's the beauty of silence. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't need to prove a point. It simply creates a void where he once felt certainty. It forces him to sit with himself, with his choices, his words, his actions. When you stop talking, he starts thinking. When you stop explaining, he starts replaying. That's when regret begins to form, because for the first time, he's no longer distracted by your energy. Your silence removes the noise, and all that's left is the echo of everything he took for granted. Silence is misunderstood by many because we're conditioned to believe closure comes from words. We think if we say enough, explain enough, or express our pain clearly enough, the other person will finally get it. But people who truly value you don't need convincing, and those who don't will never understand, no matter how many times you try. Silence breaks that pattern. It says, I've said enough, I've felt enough, I've given enough. It's not about giving up, it's about letting go with grace. And here's what makes it even more powerful: silence shifts the focus back to you. When you're not chasing, not explaining, not reacting, you start to reclaim your emotional space. You begin to hear your own thoughts again. You start to feel the calm that was buried under constant overthinking. That peace you find within yourself becomes your proof that you made the right choice. You begin to see that walking away quietly doesn't mean you're weak. It means you've mastered restraint. Because strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just calm, still, and steady. He might interpret your silence however he wants: confusion, anger, or indifference. That's not your concern anymore. Your silence isn't meant to send a message to him. It's meant to protect you. It's a declaration that says, you no longer have access to me, and that's the part that shakes him. Because men often think they can come and go as they please, that they can lose you and still find you waiting. But when you leave quietly, you show him something different: finality. Over time, he'll realize that your silence was the loudest goodbye. No arguments, no closure, no dramatic scene, just stillness. And in that stillness, he'll hear everything you never needed to say: the pain, the disappointment, the lessons, and the strength it took to walk away. Your silence will speak for you long after you've gone, because when you leave in peace, you leave powerfully. And that kind of silence doesn't fade, it echoes in his memory, reminding him of the woman who didn't need to shout to make her point. She just walked away, and in doing so, said it all. When you leave in silence, something incredible happens. You begin to reclaim your power. For too long, your energy has been tied to someone else's behavior, their validation, their attention. Every time they pulled away, you chased. Every time they went cold, you tried to warm them, and in doing that, you handed over pieces of your strength without even realizing it. Reclaiming your power starts with understanding that you never lost it. You just gave it away to someone who didn't deserve it. Silence becomes the way you take it back. It's the boundary that says, I am no longer available to someone who made me feel unworthy. When you stop explaining and stop trying to fix what someone broke, you redirect that energy inward. Instead of waiting for an apology or hoping for closure, you start pouring that time and focus into yourself. You stop performing emotional labor for someone who isn't invested in understanding you. That's where your power lies, in choosing yourself quietly but firmly every single day. Silence is not just the absence of words, it's the presence of self-respect. It's the moment you decide that peace is more valuable than proving your point. The power of walking away silently is that it teaches you emotional discipline. Anyone can react. Anyone can send the angry text, make the emotional call, or post something to get attention. But restraint, that's where true strength lies, because silence doesn't come from weakness, it comes from clarity. You've seen the pattern, you've felt the disappointment, you've reached the point where you know nothing you say will change what they refuse to see. So instead of trying to win the argument, you step out of it completely. That's power. It's choosing your peace over their chaos. And here's the thing, power doesn't always feel good at first. In fact, the silence can feel heavy. The absence of their voice, their messages, or their presence can sting. But that's temporary discomfort, the kind that leads to permanent freedom. Each moment you stay silent, you strengthen the muscle of self-control. You start realizing that you don't need validation to feel valuable. You don't need attention to feel seen. You are enough, even without the noise. And when that realization sets in, you begin to feel lighter. You begin to feel free. What's beautiful about reclaiming your power through silence is that it changes your energy. You stop chasing and suddenly you become magnetic. You stop reaching and suddenly people start wondering where you went. It's not a game, it's a shift. Because when you no longer need someone to fill your emotional gaps, you begin to radiate something deeper: independence, peace, and confidence. That energy speaks louder than words ever could. It says, I'm no longer waiting to be chosen, I choose myself. And while he may not understand it right away, he'll feel the shift. The version of you that once over-explained, that once tolerated half-effort, that once waited for him to grow up, she's gone. In her place stands a woman who doesn't need to announce her worth because she lives it. She doesn't chase closure because she's already found it within. That's the woman silence creates. When you reclaim your power, you stop living in reaction to him and start living in response to yourself. You wake up no longer checking your phone for his messages, no longer analyzing what went wrong, no longer waiting for him to get it. Because the truth is, you got it, you got the lesson, the growth, the self-awareness, and now you're free to move forward, unshaken and unstoppable. Silence isn't the end of your story. It's the moment you take the pen back and start writing a new one on your terms, with your power fully intact. When you leave in silence, something happens that words could never achieve. You create mystery. And that mystery is powerful because it leaves space for reflection. The truth is, people rarely reflect when you're still accessible. As long as you're there explaining, messaging, or reacting, they still feel in control. They still know you're available. But when you suddenly go quiet, that control is gone. Your absence becomes loud. Your silence becomes the thing that echoes in their mind long after you've walked away. It makes them question, did I lose something valuable? And for the first time, they have to sit with the possibility that they did. You see, mystery isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing games or trying to make someone chase you. It's about energy. Pulling your energy back so that the dynamic shifts. When you stop giving them access to your emotions, your attention, your availability, you remind them that your presence was never guaranteed. It was earned, and when they took it for granted, they lost it. Silence forces that realization in a way that confrontation never could. Because confrontation gives them an opportunity to argue, to defend, to deflect. Silence gives them nothing, and that nothing is where the regret begins to grow. He may not admit it, but when you're gone and the noise fades, he starts to notice the spaces you once filled. The little things he never paid attention to, your messages, your laughter, the way you cared, all start to feel heavier in their absence. What once felt routine now feels like a loss. That's the consequence of silence. It transforms the familiar into something he misses. And the more he tries to distract himself, the more that quiet lingers. Regret doesn't come from being yelled at. It comes from the moment someone realizes they've lost something irreplaceable. Your silence also exposes what kind of man he really is, because some will notice your absence and do nothing. They'll sit in pride or pretend it doesn't matter, but others, the ones capable of growth, will start to look inward. They'll replay their choices, their words, their behavior, and that's when accountability begins. When you remove your voice, your energy becomes the mirror he has to look into. And not everyone can handle that reflection. But whether he changes or not is no longer your concern, because silence means you've already chosen peace over the outcome. The beautiful irony of silence is that while he's over there wondering what happened, you're evolving. You're no longer wasting your emotional energy trying to be understood. You're using it to heal, to rebuild, to reconnect with yourself. The mystery he feels is the clarity you've gained. You start glowing differently. Your energy feels calmer, more centered. You no longer move from a place of pain but from peace. And that shift, that unspoken strength, becomes the very thing that makes you magnetic. You're not chasing him, but he's now chasing a version of you that no longer exists. Mystery also redefines how you show up in future relationships. You learn that your silence has value, that not everything needs a reaction. You realize that you don't have to prove your worth to anyone. Your absence already speaks for it. You understand that mystery doesn't mean being distant. It means being selective with your energy. It means knowing that your time, attention, and love are privileges, not guarantees. When you leave in silence, you give him the gift of missing you and yourself, the gift of peace. He'll replay every moment trying to understand when he lost you, while you're already writing a new chapter of your life. That's the true power of silence. It creates a story where you move forward, and he stays stuck wondering why he didn't appreciate you when he had the chance. Leaving in silence is not about revenge or pride, it's about reclaiming your peace. It's the decision to stop giving your energy to situations that only drain you. So many people mistake walking away quietly for weakness, but it's actually one of the strongest moves you can make. It takes courage to let go of something that once meant everything to you without needing closure, without needing to be understood, without needing to be validated. Because deep down, you finally understand that closure doesn't come from him, it comes from you choosing to stop participating in pain. When you stop responding, stop explaining, stop fighting to be seen, you take your power back. You no longer give someone the ability to dictate how you feel or how your story ends. Your silence becomes your boundary. It says, I deserve peace, and if I can't find it with you, I'll find it without you. That's not cold, that's self-respect. Because you've learned that love shouldn't require you to lose yourself to keep it. Sometimes walking away is not an act of anger, it's an act of survival. It's saying, I choose me this time. And here's what's powerful, silence doesn't just remove the noise from your life. It creates space for healing. When you're no longer reacting to him, you start reconnecting to yourself. You begin to hear your own voice again. The one that got quieter every time you tried to be enough for someone who couldn't see your value. That voice starts reminding you of who you were before the heartbreak, strong, capable, deserving. You begin to see how much energy you poured into trying to make something work that was never meant to. And with every moment of quiet, the grip of the past loosens just a little bit more. The hardest part about leaving in silence is the beginning, the urge to reach out, to explain, to make sure he knows what he lost. But over time, you realize that silence itself delivers that message far louder than words ever could. Because silence communicates finality, it says, "There's nothing left to say." It shows that you've stopped negotiating for your worth. You're no longer looking for his apology, his understanding, or his validation. You're simply done, and that kind of peace can't be broken by confusion or manipulation. Eventually, your silence becomes something he feels deeply. He'll replay the last conversation, wondering why you didn't come back this time. He'll scroll through your messages, hoping for a response that never comes. And the more time passes, the clearer it becomes to him. He didn't just lose your presence. He lost access to your energy, your kindness, your heart. That's when regret begins to chase him, not because you tried to make him feel it, but because he finally understands that you're not waiting around anymore. And here's the beautiful truth. While he's stuck in that realization, you're already moving on. You're rediscovering peace in the silence you once feared. You're learning that solitude isn't loneliness, it's power. You're becoming someone who doesn't need to explain her absence, because her peace speaks for itself. You start to attract new energy, new possibilities, new confidence. You stop looking back and start building forward. Leaving in silence doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you finally cared enough about yourself to stop suffering. You stopped chasing explanations and started choosing peace. And once you taste that peace, that deep, grounded, quiet strength, you'll never chase noise again. Because silence isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of your freedom. The beauty of leaving in silence is that, over time, your peace begins to speak louder than his presence ever did. At first, it feels strange, the quiet, the stillness, the space where he used to exist. You might even mistake it for emptiness. But slowly, that quiet starts to feel different. It starts to feel safe. You realize that for the first time in a long while, your emotions aren't being pulled in every direction. You're no longer waiting for a text, no longer replaying conversations in your head, no longer trying to decode what his mixed signals mean. The chaos that once consumed you is replaced by calm, and that calm, that's what real strength feels like. You see, peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with grand gestures or dramatic endings. It arrives quietly through small moments of self-respect, through choosing not to respond, through deciding that your energy is too valuable to be wasted on uncertainty. And as your peace grows, something shifts inside you. You stop being drawn to the same patterns that once broke you. You stop wanting to prove your worth to people who can't recognize it. You stop confusing chaos with passion. Peace changes what you crave. It teaches you that love should never feel like constant tension. What he doesn't realize, and what he eventually will, is that your silence isn't about indifference. It's about evolution. While he's wondering where you went, you're building yourself back up. You're investing in your dreams, your goals, your confidence. You're learning to fill your life with things that make you happy instead of people who make you doubt yourself. That growth, that transformation, is something he can't touch, because the version of you that used to chase, explain, or wait no longer exists. You've evolved beyond the version of yourself that tolerated confusion as connection, and that's where the true power lies. He'll eventually notice, not because you made a scene when you left, but because you didn't. The lack of reaction will be the loudest message he's ever received. When a woman who once gave everything suddenly gives nothing, it hits differently, because silence holds weight. It's not passive, it's intentional. It says, "You no longer have access to me." And when he realizes that access is gone for good, that's when the regret begins to creep in. He'll start to remember your patience, your kindness, your consistency, but by then you'll have moved so far beyond needing him that his realization will come too late. As your peace deepens, something else happens. You start glowing differently, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because calm looks beautiful on you. You're no longer drained by emotional chaos. You're no longer seeking closure from someone who only gave confusion. You've created your own closure by choosing peace over pain. That glow, that energy, that sense of contentment, it's magnetic. People will start to notice, he will start to notice, but you won't need their validation anymore because your peace is your validation. Leaving in silence and finding peace doesn't mean you've won some game. It means you've outgrown the need to play one. It means you've learned that strength isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about walking away and never looking back. The peace you build after that kind of heartbreak becomes your foundation. It becomes your proof that you can survive loss without losing yourself. It becomes the quiet reminder that you don't need anyone to complete you. You were already whole. And that's the moment you'll know you've truly healed, when the silence no longer feels like absence, but presence. The presence of your own strength, your own self-worth, your own inner calm, and that, more than anything, is what he'll regret losing, not your love, but the peace that came with it. When you leave in silence and let regret chase him, something beautiful happens. You begin to rise in ways you never imagined. You stop waiting for someone to change, to come back, or to finally realize what they had. Instead, you turn that energy inward and begin rebuilding yourself piece by piece. You start reclaiming all the parts of you that you gave away trying to keep the relationship alive. You begin focusing on your growth, your confidence, your purpose. And the more you invest in yourself, the more you realize that losing him wasn't the tragedy you once thought it was. It was the turning point. Healing after silence isn't about pretending you don't care. It's about proving to yourself that you can stand strong even when you care deeply. It's about recognizing that you don't need anyone to validate your worth because it's something you already possess. The pain that once felt unbearable starts to transform into power. Every tear becomes proof of your courage. Every lonely night becomes a step toward rediscovering your independence. You learn that healing isn't about forgetting him, it's about remembering yourself. It's about seeing the woman in the mirror and realizing she survived something she thought she couldn't. And here's the truth, while you're rising, while you're reclaiming your life, he's stuck in the past replaying moments where he could have done better. Because regret always comes too late. It doesn't appear when he hurts you. It appears when he realizes you've healed without him. When he sees that you didn't crumble, that you didn't chase, that you didn't come back like before. Regret begins when your silence no longer looks like sadness but peace, when your life starts to blossom without his presence. That's when he feels the weight of what he lost, but by that time, you've already outgrown the version of yourself that needed him. You've built boundaries, you've learned to trust your intuition again. You've reconnected with your goals, your passions, your joy. You start to see your life expanding in ways it never could when you were emotionally stuck in someone else's story. And that's what real freedom feels like, not the absence of pain, but the presence of self. You no longer need to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. What's even more powerful is how your silence redefines what you attract next. When you move on with grace instead of bitterness, you elevate your energy. You start attracting people who value peace over chaos, honesty over games, consistency over confusion. You're no longer drawn to the same kind of love that hurt you. You recognize the difference between attention and affection, between being wanted and being valued. The person you become after you leave in silence is wiser, softer in heart, but stronger in boundaries. You no longer chase love. You become the kind of woman love chases. And in that transformation lies the real win, not that he regrets losing you, but that you don't regret losing him. You realize that everything you needed from him, validation, respect, peace, you were capable of giving yourself all along. You stopped making him the source of your happiness and started being the creator of it. You begin to smile again, not because he's thinking of you, but because you're finally thinking of yourself. So, when you leave in silence and rise in peace, understand this. His regret is not your victory, your growth is. His confusion is not your closure, your healing is. The woman you become after walking away quietly is not the same woman who once begged to be understood. She's wiser, freer, untouchable. And that, right there, is what makes silence the most powerful answer you could ever give. There comes a moment when silence says everything words never could. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop chasing clarity from someone who was never listening, that's when you truly set yourself free. Leaving in silence isn't about pride, it's about peace. It's not about punishing him, it's about protecting your heart. Because the truth is, not every goodbye needs to be spoken out loud. Some goodbyes are written in your energy, in your absence, in your refusal to keep showing up for someone who stopped showing up for you. Regret will find him not because you tried to make it happen, but because it's the natural consequence of losing something real. It always arrives when the silence settles in, when he realizes the warmth he took for granted isn't coming back. But by the time regret knocks on his door, you'll already be somewhere far beyond his reach, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You'll have rebuilt yourself in ways he never imagined possible. You'll be living proof that peace after chaos is the sweetest kind of revenge. So leave quietly, leave gracefully, leave with your dignity intact and your heart focused forward. Don't look back to see if he misses you. Trust that the universe handles that part. You just keep rising, keep healing, keep becoming the woman who no longer needs closure from broken people. Because the day you choose silence over chaos, peace over confusion, and self-worth over fear, that's the day regret stops chasing you and starts chasing him.